Hello, and welcome to the Trepa Technologies Security Plus course. My name is Johnny Bandon, and I will be your instructor for this video series. This video will cover Domain 1.8 penetration testing. Now let's get started. A penetration test is a great way to stay proactive as a security administrator. A penetration test seeks to find vulnerabilities in our network and then remediate those vulnerabilities. Penetration testing is a small portion of the Security Plus exam, but it is a whole industry where you can make a great career. Penetration testing firms are dedicated to taking on the hacker's mindset to expose faults, holes, and vulnerabilities in your enterprise. This includes your physical security, logical and technical security, and even a user awareness program, trying to find holes in all those different controls that your enterprise has. Now, penetration testing can be very broad or specific to a system or application. As a penetration testing firm, you also must adhere to ROEs or rules of engagements set by the company hiring you. And as the person hiring the penetration testing firm, which one day might be you once you become Sec Plus certified, you must be clear and concise on how you want your enterprise tested. So here we can kind of see the steps on how to get started doing a penetration test. Dave thinks he's done a good job securing his network, but how does he know? Dave decides to hire a pen tester to try and exploit weaknesses. Dave, management, and the pen testing company come to an agreement on the ROEs of the pen test. And the pen testing company does what it does best, right? Trying to get inside your network and wreak havoc. The rules of engagement, or ROEs, are something you must establish with the penetration testing firm prior to the actual test taking place. The ROE set the guidelines and parameters for what kind of test and how the test should be conducted. And the ROE should be a written contract that the organization and the penetration testing firm sign together. A bug bounty program is something an organization implements to discover vulnerabilities in their network. A bug bounty program allows a company to put a financial reward for anyone or firm who discovers a vulnerability and relays that information to the company. I believe Apple just created a new app. Again, I'm recording this July 15th, 2022, and they put a $2 million reward if someone can break their secure mode on the new updated iOS. A lot of big companies will implement these bug bounty programs for their big security implementations, right? Essentially, that's all it is. Same thing as a regular bounty. Just going ahead and putting a price on something if a company can make it happen. And then the bug bounty prices really depend on your company, how much you're willing to spend, and if a vulnerability has such a low score. What do we mean by this? So let's say Log4j, right? That was a huge deal earlier this year. And let's say you think you've updated and patched that Log4j vulnerability. Well, you can put a bug bounty out there for someone to try to go discover it throughout your network. Now, let's say you host a system, let's say like a Windows Server 2016, and there's a known vulnerability with a CVS score of 1.7, real low. You may only offer up a couple thousand for someone to go discover that throughout your network because it's really low threat, right? So bug bounty programs are an excellent way of discovering vulnerabilities in your network. Now we have actually running the pen test. So the Security Plus exam lays out the 4 steps for running a penetration test. This sets a good baseline for how a typical penetration test is run. Now, I've never personally done a penetration test on my own, right? We've done red team and blue team exercises in my enterprise, but actually knowing real world what happens, talking to some security professionals, how CompTIA wants you to learn how to run a pen test, it's just a good baseline. It's not always this granular. But here's how we're going to learn it so we get certified and become Sec Plus certified and get that nice job in the government or at an MSP or a big tech company somewhere, right? So here are the sequence of events chronologically for running a pen test. The first step will be conducting reconnaissance and finding a vulnerability to exploit. Once an attacker does that, or the pen tester does that, the second step will be to gain root access to a system that the pen tester has exploited. This is known as a privilege escalation attack, and that is the second step in the pen test. The third step will be to pivot or move laterally on the network. In this step, the pen tester will move to another system in the enterprise and ensure the pen tester can move freely between systems. So here we see him becoming root or getting admin privileges. And then the pen tester is going to try to go to different services or network devices, seeing where they can go with their new root access or privilege access. And once the tester feels like he can move laterally, he or she can move laterally throughout the network. Sec Plus exam, last time I took it, they called this pivoting. The last step is going to be to create persistence. Persistence describes having a backdoor or a way for the attacker to make it back into the network without going through these three steps again. And that'll be the last step in the pen test before cleanup happens, right? So now let's go over that. At the end of the test, once you've created persistence and the network's been fully exploited, the pen testers conduct cleanup. This includes presenting the results to the company and some potential fixes if that's part of what that firm does. And this also includes removing any tools or persistence they left on the network. So getting rid of those backdoors. Now let's get into some of the different types of penetration testing environments. So a known environment or a white box test gives the penetration testing firm full access to any resources and inventory in the organization. So here's our pen tester right here. He or she or the group or that team can see the entire enterprise, what they got going on, right? So they can see the different types of hardware, software, and technology used. This sometimes could include some access or some privilege level access, right? But bottom line up front, in a white box test, the pen tester has complete knowledge of the network they are testing. And then we have the unknown environment or a black box test. In this test, the pen tester has no prior knowledge of the network, and this is to simulate when an actual external threat actor would also see if they try to hack into your organization's network. So really, this is like testing an APT, right? What they can see from outside. And then we have the partially known environment or a gray box test. In this, the pen tester will have some knowledge of the enterprise. This could be as simple as a network diagram or allowing that pen tester to do reconnaissance, letting them into the building to see physical security, giving them some sort of access to the network so they have some knowledge. So notice here, right? They know there's a firewall, but they don't know about this access point, this switch, this printer, right? Just a quick example of a gray box test. And then we have reconnaissance. So during the initial phases of a penetration test, a penetration testing firm must conduct reconnaissance. The Security Plus exam wants you to know about the two different overall types of reconnaissance. Passive reconnaissance is conducting research on an organization without actually touching the network. That means no Nmap scans, none of that, right? So this could include some OSINT research, OSINT being open source intelligence. And for example, suppose a company like General Dynamics wants you to perform a pen test on their office in Scottsdale, Arizona. So how can you do some passive reconnaissance? Well, in that case, you could research all the employees in the Scottsdale office on LinkedIn and maybe keep doing that research to learn some daily habits or different roles in that office to learn about their network. So if they have a database, a UX designer, a front-end designer, network administrator, and let's say that network administrator has Cisco certs and boasts about his Cisco experience, you know there might be Cisco equipment running that network. Active reconnaissance directly engages the organization, either through scanning, testing the physical security, maybe doing some war driving or Wi-Fi analysis on the network. Active reconnaissance is going to touch that network or organization in some way. Then we have footprinting. Footprinting is a technique penetration testing firms use to try and map out different technologies and services being used in the network. A lot of different ways this can work. This can be done. My example here, a pen tester runs an Nmap scan, and that Nmap scan returns a list of operating system, their IP addresses, and definitely some open ports and services, or maybe even active TCP UDP connections. That is called footprinting. Then we have some more reconnaissance techniques. War driving or war flying. Those are active reconnaissance techniques designed to exploit or learn about wireless networks in an enterprise. War driving is driving by the workplace. And war flying, something new in the Sec Plus exam, is using a drone to conduct reconnaissance. So as our technology advances, so do the attacks. Organizations must be trained and must be able to rehearse their responses to incidences. We can accomplish this by implementing training and exercises into the routine of our IT processes. So there are many different training events we can conduct in our enterprise, like simulations. We can do tabletop exercises. Excuse my poor handwriting. And we can dive deep into these different types of training and exercises, but later in the series, we'll actually discuss this more in detail. For this section, CompTIA wants you to know that there are things you can do to rehearse your teams and to make sure your organization knows what to do in case of an incident or during the penetration test. Because some penetration testing can be live, right? You as management could hire that pen testing firm, and you can either put your team on alert or just see how they react or don't react to someone trying to penetrate their network. And after that, you can see that you may need more exercises and training for your teams. So let's get into the different teams and members when you do these exercises. So the red team is an in-house penetration testing team whose role is to simulate what an attack would look like, or it could be the actual penetration testing firm, and you alert your cyber team that, hey, a penetration test is going to happen. They're the red team. And then your role as a defenders is the blue team. The blue team is the incident response team whose role it is to defend against the red team. And then we have the white team. This is typically management or even senior engineers, and they'll act as referees and observe the red and blue team's attacks and responses. They may also be making sure that REs are still in place, right? And the last thing we'll cover is the purple team. The purple team is activated after an exercise. This is where the red and blue teams will get together to discuss the exercise and conduct an after action report to review techniques and to go over lessons learned. All right, I want to thank you for viewing our last video in Domain 1. Stay tuned for our next video. We're going to start going over Domain 2, and we'll start by going over Domain 2.1 Enterprise Security Concepts. Thank you for viewing.